With the renewal of the IndyCar license for iRacing, there has been widespread unanimous joy within the community. Despite the damage that losing the license for a year and 9 days did, this situation now gives us a great opportunity to renew interest in iRacing's most unique car in terms of its schedule. IndyCars run on both road and street courses and on ovals, ranging from bull rings like Iowa to speedways like Indianapolis. Previously, I have created track guides that included general guidelines for the IndyCar, such as differences between primary and alternate tires, basic weight jacket usage, and guidelines for running in traffic on ovals. While the same principles apply today, these videos are now approaching 3 years in age and an update is in order. So in order to create an omnibus go-to guide for my previous videos, plus other resources from drivers in our community, I have decided to make this video a basic guide to iRacing IndyCar. Together we will explore available setup options on road courses and ovals. We will also discuss the IndyCar's available in-car adjustments including brake bias, fuel maps, front and rear anti-roll bars, and the weight jacker. I will also show you examples of how to effectively drive the car within the iRacing Sim's parameters and discuss basic racecraft for road and street courses and ovals. Finally, outside of the car, I will also show you other resources you can look to, including the IndyCar Community Discord and other guides from drivers within the community. I hope you will find this guide informative and helpful, so let's get started. Let's examine the garage options. When you hover over any of the garage options such as tire pressures and the aero options on the first page, iRacing provides a tooltip with a basic description. I will leave basic adjustments such as tire pressures, spring rates, ride heights, camber, caster, and towing off to the side for the moment and focus on options unique to the IndyCar. But do not fear, they will be discussed later and with links to specific resources. Currently, we are viewing aero setup options on the oval configuration for the IndyCar at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You have various options of wing wicker on the front wing, such as Step 1, Step 2, or Step 3, as well as the option to attach a main plane extension with the option of including Step 1 wing wicker. The rear wing also has 3 options available to choose from. Wing wickers are a finer adjustment than wing angle, but you will notice they have a significant effect on front downforce percentage and drag. There are also various body aero options, including the trailing edge wicker and options for the rear diffuser at the back of the car. Available adjustments will vary on ovals depending on the size of the track. At Iowa Speedway, for example, the maximum rear wing angle is 20.4 degrees and only the 3/8 of an inch rear wicker is allowed on the rear wing and no front wicker on the front wing is allowed. On the road course side and the street course side, you have a full range of aero options that are available to you. But generally speaking, most road and street course setups in the IndyCar run with a high downforce package, and medium or low downforce package is only viable at select tracks. Road course specific setup adjustments include the third spring, a device used to control car pitch, and an adjustable differential on the rear. In the chassis section, you can adjust the front and rear anti-roll bar on both oval and road course configurations. You can select between a large or small roll bar, the type of material it is made of such as titanium or steel, and also select a value between 1 and 6. 1 is the softest setting, and 6 is the stiffest setting. Roll bar adjustments are also available as in-car tools, and we will discuss their effect more in depth later once we step into the car. If you are loaded in the oval configuration, you also have access to the weight jacker. Simply put, the weight jacker is an in-car tool that allows you to adjust crossweight. It does this by adjusting the ride height of the right rear. The weight jacker has an input range of -20 to +20. Negative weight jacker lowers the right rear, therefore making the car run tighter in a corner. Positive weight jacker increases the right rear height and therefore makes it looser. To see the effect, you can adjust the weight jacker in the garage page. Notice how it increases the rear ride height while also shifting crossweight when you add positive weight jacker, and how it does the opposite effect when you go negative. Please keep in mind that the setup will only pass tech if the weight jacker is set at 0. Here's the visual effect that weight jacker has on the car. The rear ride height will increase as positive weight jacker is added, and then it will decrease as negative weight jacker is added. This footage here is sped up because it is very difficult to see at speed how far someone is adjusting their weight jacker. If you are looking at the garage page and are completely lost, unable to decipher the many setup options available to you in the tires, aero, chassis, dampers, and drivetrain pages, and feel your brain is about to explode, Here are some resources that I can provide to you. From our team, Brandon Trano has a free IndyCar strategy guide ebook that provides you with intricate details on all available setup options and how the car reacts to the changes in that setup. Additionally, for an even deeper dive, community member Adam Blocker has published numerous videos on setup parameters and general setup theory. All these resources are linked down below. Now with class dismissed, let's jump into the car and explore general driving, racecraft, in-car tool options, and basic setup changes we can make to the fixed setup that resembles an open setup. Alright, now that the classwork is over and we're sitting inside the car here, the first thing you're going to notice is if you're on a triple screen setup like I am, there's a slight possibility you may not be able to physically see the dash in the game. So you may have to use a third-party dash app like I'm using right here. This is Z1 Dashboard. I will make this available in the dash gallery and I'll have it linked down below. I have this because basically I need it. So what you see in this dash here is pretty similar to what you see in the game. I've added a couple modifications that help me personally. As far as what it looks like in the game, I can go ahead and show you real quick. So if you are able to see this in the game, you're going to see first, obviously, the gear shifters, so what gear you're in, distance of the car forward, the car behind, how much fuel you have left, the lap counts, lap time you're on, and relative, basically. The boxes on the bottom are the most important, though. The first box is FARB, so it's the front anti-roll bar, which is at stiffest setting at 6. You have the rear anti-roll bar, which is at 1, the softest setting, and this does have a rear bar in the setup. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Also has the weight jacker position, so you can go from, again, -20 to +20 or whatever position that you need if you're in traffic or clean air. You also have your fuel position here, which we'll get into in a little bit. You have 8 different fuel modes you can pick from. You have an MPG box, which tells you what your previous lap was in miles per gallon, something pretty important if you're in a potential fuel safe position. And the POS here is not what you think it stands for. It stands for position. It is the position you are on the track at the moment in the race. So that was the first dash screen. If you switch to dash 2 within your F box, you'll also have the option to see the oil temperature, the water temperature, oil pressure, fuel pressure. It's most important that we look at oil temp and water temp, and that's really important when it comes to running in traffic, and also your radiator setting too, and that can be reliant upon the ambient temperatures we'll get into later. And also visible is your current brake bias setting, or brake balance as it's labeled here in the dash. So now that we're back in the normal driving view, we're going to go ahead and take a couple quick laps around the speedway. And the most important thing to note regarding Indy cars and outlaps and ovals is generally your car is set up to go fast around the track. It's not going to act the same on an outlap, especially on an access road. Indy, it doesn't matter so much, it's generally flat out, but other tracks, if you're not careful, you could get loose, you could get tight, so you want to make sure you're not going full blast in the outlap, although Indy is a track where you are able to do so, and there's a couple others you can as well. But we'll go ahead and take that outlap, so starting first gear, and we're going to try and take it flat. If I wreck, I'm not redoing it. I'll keep it in the video. Let's just make a nice apex. And there we go. Hey, didn't wreck. Okay, we'll take that. So a couple general things about this car. It's got 6 gears. The rev limiter goes at up to 12,000 RPM, so shift right before 12K. The way my dash is set up, the blue lights will flash once I hit 11.8. And by the time I register seeing the blue lights, it's about near the rev limiter and I'm about ready to shift. On an oval, I've got a little bit more time, so I can really stretch up to the rev range, but generally on a road course, once you see blue, I would just shift right away. So in terms of the rev range that you want to keep while driving, you really want to make sure you keep it in the power band. So the power band for this car, it's roughly between 11.2 to 11.8. You don't want to be hitting the rev limiter, but you also don't want to be bogging down the corners. So you really need to find a good cruising gear, so to speak, a good clean air gear like we have right now with this 5th gear, which is really nice actually. You want 5th gear to just barely be touching 11.85 K on the going into the corners. And generally, if it stays above 11,500, I'm going to be pretty happy with how the gear is going, because anything below you start to kind of bog down a little bit. And we're being nice and smooth with the steering. Again, one thing I notice is people will see this car, they see it's got wings on it. It's it's obviously not a stock car, So they figure, well, I can toss around as much as I want and have no repercussions. Well, generally, yeah, it's a much lighter car. It's not like a stock car. And you can afford to turn it a little bit more, get a little bit more out of it, but you can still scrub the right front if you're not careful. It's pretty hard to do this in clean air at Indy, but at other tracks it's much more possible, even places like Michigan and Auto Club, and definitely the short ovals too, and the intermediate ovals too, depending on the track. So just nice and smooth. The car is very neutral, so I'm not making any changes, but this will give me an opportunity to show you kind of what the in-car tools will do, how the car will react. So I normally wouldn't do this, but let's go plus 10 weight jacker. It's quite a big swing in terms of raising the right rear and adjusting crossweight. I enter the corner, and I got a lot more turn out of it, but I could kind of feel the rear unsettled. Again, doing the same thing here. You do have to be careful, though, that if you're just running a bunch of positive weight jacker, especially at Indy, and you're running it on the straightaways, remember it's raising the rear of your car, so it's inducing downforce. So you're actually creating drag on the straightaways. If you're in the draft, it doesn't matter so much because the draft, as we'll get, is very, very powerful in this car and stretches very far back. But on your own, it is kind of a detriment. So let's do the opposite here. We're going to go ahead and go back neutral. And we're going to go minus 10 into turn 2 and just see what happens. Again, another big swing. And again, it's a very subtle difference. I'm still going to make the corner. I'm on fresh tires, just started my run, but I couldn't really hit the white line like I was before. Generally, you want to keep your tires, if we can get our left side tires in the below the white line here, that's pretty much the optimal cornering. So let's go minus 20, and that should probably give us our intended effect. So again, minus 20 is if your car is basically wrecking loose. And you would not normally want to run this. Actually, even if your car was loose, you normally still would not go to minus 20. So again, our car's still making the corner because this is actually a pretty decently built fixed setup that we're running right now. But if I was in traffic right now running minus 20, it would be like a Cessna flying behind a 747. And the more negative weight jacker you run, that's more negative crossweight, and this is going to be really hurting the right front as well. Because as we're doing this, the right front is basically, it's sliding out at this point. It's not cornering optimally, I should say, as there we go, hit the wall finally. So you want to be careful. If your car is loose, the magic fix isn't always negative weight jacker. You might want to just kind of balance the car out in the first place. So as you're going to see with this accident here, this car is very fragile, and it's quite obvious with the impact speed that we have here. But that is to say, a much lighter hit can still significantly alter your car's performance and could give you some wheel damage and potentially even cause you to have to go to the pits to answer a meatball flag. So we're going to go ahead and try and give this car some subtle damage, which honestly is sometimes hard to get right. But what often happens is you get tied out of a corner and you hit the wall like that. Now that's a hit generally you can actually get away with. It happens to the actual Indy cars where they white wall the tires, so they say, because it just takes the paint off the walls. But if you're doing that too many times, that's eventually going to cause wheel damage, suspension damage. So you really want to try and avoid that. That is a hit you can walk away from and get away from and still race. But if you're treading into the territory of like 2x contacts, then that means take a better corner. Don't track out as much. So don't do something like that. That's a big hit. So that's now going to significantly alter the car. The wheel might be bent. Toe is definitely going to be bent. That's the main thing that it kind of causes if you hit the wall like that. And it's definitely going to reduce straightaway speed. It's going to affect your cornering speed. And it is damage that will be fixable in a repair. I'm already feeling kind of a bit of a tightness. It's not too bad, but the car is now just generally slower. So the other thing I want to talk about here is our fuel maps. So right now, all these laps we've been in map 1. So there's 8 different maps. We have map 1 through 5. So I go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So between those 5, these are your fuel save oval maps. So right now I'm in map 5. Map 1 is full rich. You can go as fast as you can, it burns the most fuel. And map 5 is full lean in terms of an oval map. So it is very easy to control the fuel rate of the car and how much fuel you're burning just with these fuel maps. You can do it as well by lifting in traffic in map 1, and you could hit similar fuel numbers, but map 5 is very, very efficient in a number of different ways. And depending on the track as well, going to a lower fuel map can actually help you save tire. And the reason why is the fact I'm now on map 5, I can very much easily make the corners. And this is important in traffic too. Not so much important when you're in clean air, but map 5, you're gonna have a slower overall straightaway speed, but when you go into the corners, you won't be lifting as much due to aero push, and that's something we'll talk about as well. It's really important in this car, you really want to maximize exit speed. If you're coming in too deep and you're scrubbing a lot of speed off, that leaves you very vulnerable to a pass from behind, especially when the draft is very, very significant. So running in map 5, I've been hitting 0.58 for my fuel number, or 4.36 mpg, compared to basically 0.62, 0.63, depending on the conditions when you're running in map 1. The other fuel maps are 6 and 7. So 6 and 7 are both full rich. They're used mostly for road courses. You can use them on ovals if you want, but if you're running flat out most of the time, it doesn't really matter too much. Me and some other people, we like running 6 because it easily lets us switch to map 5. Instead of going from 1, switching to 5, and sometimes maybe hitting it 1 too many times, I can go from just 5 to 6. Full rich right now, and now full lean. The last map is map 8, which you should only use during full course cautions. So I'm in map 8 now. The car is significantly slower. This is not a pace that you can keep up. Now, you might be thinking, well, what if it's like an extreme fuel save situation? Could I just run map 8 all the way around? I suppose you could. I'll show you what happens if you do. So starting our first lap now. Again, significantly slower. We're not even above 210. We're running like 1970 speeds right now. So we're going quite slow. We'd be a sitting duck. The other reason why this is bad as well is it really hurts your engine temperature. The water temperature, the oil temperature will significantly rise because you are no longer putting enough air through the car. It's an air-cooled car, and the faster you go, the more air that's going to get in the car, and it'll run cooler. But now completing our full map 8 lap here, fuel mileage was 0.56, so yes, you are saving more in map 8. It's still not really recommended unless it is an absolute dire situation, perhaps. But this is obviously not something you could like run behind other cars and save fuel that way. It is a last-ditch effort. So normally, you simply run this under yellow. And when you're fuel saving under yellow, of course you're going pace speed, and you ultimately want to keep the revs down to a minimum. So I go to 6th gear, map 8, and using as little as the throttle as I can. I'm often just trying to keep it steady and not having to accelerate, too much, and just keeping it there. Sometimes I can clutch in. The one thing though you cannot do, I repeat, you cannot do, I suppose you could, but I'll show you why you should not and cannot do this, is I cannot just turn off the car as I look for my hotkey. I took it off the keyboard for a reason. All right, now I've got the key bound, so we're just gonna pull on the pits here. Let's pretend it's a full course caution. 6th gear. And I'm thinking, yeah, I could save some more fuel. I hit the I key. And you can see exactly what happens here. I'm gonna click I again. So in this case, actually, I'm going fast enough so I can kind of bump start the car. So in theory, you could do it, but I'm gonna turn the car off again. And let's say we are doing a mega save here. We're trying to save as much fuel as we can under yellow. See what happened there? So the auto clutch was kicking in, and I think it was at like 43 miles an hour. The engine ceased completely. If I try and hit I now, you hear it clicking, but nothing's happening. Nobody's home. The only way you can restart your car is if someone would bump you fast enough, and then you could hit I again, but nobody's gonna do that because they're gonna lose their front wing and they're probably just gonna laugh at you. So please do not try and turn off the car under yellow. The car does not have an onboard starter. All right, we've just loaded into an AI session, and we're going to talk about just the basics of how to handle your car in the dirty air in the draft. So we're exiting the pits here behind AI, Graham Rahal, and Alex Below. And you can already start to feel it, especially if you're within like 3/4 of a second in front of somebody. The front of the nose is going to begin to push. And I got to lift out of the throttle so I don't hit the wall. So you cannot just run flat out behind another car, especially at Indianapolis. And to really kind of illustrate it, we're going to go full bore into turn 1 here. And it's already too late. That is unrecoverable. So we've hit the wall. We've got healing damage on, so we can keep on going. But that would normally be the end of your race and the end of your day. So generally the draft will go back to about 1.5 seconds or so. So I'm feeling it there just a little bit, but nothing that's going to really get me out of shape too much. But I'm still just comfort lifting. And by lifting out of the throttle, it'll help settle the nose as well, and it's going to increase the amount of downforce you've got. So instead of going full bore, I'm going to lift at the traffic light and gently apex the car. I'm going to do this again, same corner, about 60% throttle, and I'm going to get back on as soon as I feel comfortable that I can make the corner afterwards. One thing you want to take note of, depending on the line somebody runs, is going to be what you will run the opposite of. So the AI, they run their tires above the white line, so I want you to notice what I do this lap here. So again, we're going to lift early, we're going to get down though, we're going to get here, wheels below the white line, and that gives us clean air on our nose. And this is going to help us make the corner better. It'll also help our tire wear too, because the other issue with running behind somebody in traffic and you're not lifting too much and your fronts are just skating, that's really going to hurt your front tires, and it's not going to have your stint go very well if you keep on doing that. So we're going to run where they're not. So again, wheels below the white line. I'm full throttle here very comfortably. So at this point now, I cannot run my car neutral and expect to catch a car in front of me unless I have a really good car, or maybe they're in a fuel save map up there. So I'm going to push it a little bit more now this time and try and catch AI Ericsson's draft. I'm already within it, but I want to get closer now. So wheels below the white line there. We're within half a second now. Remember, every time, each 1/10 of a second you get closer, the bigger the aero wash, the aero push is going to be. Okay, so we're kind of stuck at 4/10 of a second now. There's not much we can do to get by him except start working with our in-car tools now. So we're gonna go a bit positive on the weight jacker, make our car turn a little bit better in the dirty air. And we're now able to follow much closer to AI Ericsson here than we were before. Weight jacker's not a magic solution. I can't just go like plus 20 and run right behind another car and expect it to work. Watch this actually work. Okay, so it works this time, but the other thing is too, if you're running constant positive weight jacker, remember that the right rear of your car is basically being propped up. And if you do that too much, your car is going to unload and get loose and spin off into the apron out of turn 2. Now it might be a little bit tougher because it looks like AI Ericsson has caught the draft train in the practice session we're in. Oh, he's also got a pit too. Okay. It really ruins my video. Thanks a lot, Ericsson. Devlin DeFrancesco is my new training buddy. This will provide a good example though. Now that we're in the back of a draft train, we're not just feeling one car's aero push, we're now feeling multiple. Now that we're behind 2 cars, again, you're gonna feel double the effect of aero push. So if we rock into the corner here, we're gonna take a little bit extra care to lift a lot more. We're basically 40% throttle, even with our weight jacker settings. I'm doing the same thing here, so I'm really prioritizing exit speed. I get past Isla here off the corner. Again, the AI are not going to drive like humans, obviously, so I'm going to show you some examples from replays and races I've done in the past that'll kind of better illustrate like things you'll actually see. But in terms of just getting used to like aero push, it's perfectly okay to just drive behind some AI cars and see how the car reacts when you're close to them, and practice passes as well. The AI are particularly very willing to pinch you, so you got to really earn it. Now, the other additional adjustments you can make are both front ARBs and rear ARBs. So depending on the setup, if your setup has a rear ARB, you can adjust that. And rear ARB on ovals really helps corner out. It effectively, it's not exactly raising the rear, but if you have a stiffer rear roll bar, it's going to allow the rear of the car to rotate a little bit more. And I would say rear roll bar is a bit more of a subtle adjustment. If you really need to make a change, weight jacker is the way to go. But like I was saying before, if you use too much weight jacker, that's ultimately gonna really hurt your tires. And a lot of people use a nice combination of some rear bar and some weight jacker to kind of get the desired effect. You can also go down the front ARB as well. And I'll just show you an example of kind of what happens here. We'll go down to 3. Most people don't aggressively adjust the front bar. You can usually get the same effect with weight jacker, and you have to be careful when changing bar settings. It might cause an issue with other areas of the car as well. If you're letting the front roll bar go too down low, then the front of the car is basically going to be hitting the track, and it can also really loosen up the car too. And you want to be careful of that because you do not want to drive the car loose. And just as an example, we're going to drive this thing as loose as we can. We're going to go 1.6 ARBs, healthy dose of weight jacker, plus 15, into the corner. And you could hear it sliding there. So again, this is not something you would ever do, but just an example of, at some point, the more I slide the rears into the corner, the more the tires are going to overheat. The way the iRacing tire model in the Indycar Novels right now is, you cannot drive a car off the rears. You really need a stable platform, and there it finally goes. So again, not settings you normally run, but they're not something that you can really drive the rears and expect to be going fast. Most of the time, you'll probably spin and hit the wall. All right, the last thing I'm going to show you in the car is just a basic race start. So we're going to start behind this train of AI cars and tell you typically like what I do, how I prepare for a race start in this car. So first thing we're going to do, so we're effectively under pacing right now, so we're going to already go ahead and just switch to map 8. So we're going to run map 8, go to a high gear, and we're going to just save as much fuel as we can. Is it going to matter that much? No, but every little drop counts, and if you go long at a stop, you might get a tire advantage at the end, particularly like a short track perhaps. So heading into turn 3 now, and generally when I'm racing with the team, someone at this point will call out maps and gears. So we're gonna switch to calls maps and gears. We'll switch to gear 1 and map 1, double check our tools, make sure they're fine. And this way, it's just a way for us to remember to get ready for the start, because there have been times, myself included, I've actually accidentally restarted map 8, and I was wondering why everyone was passing me. So about to go green here, pace car is off. You want to be in first gear for just about any restart in this car. I see people like restart in second gear sometimes, and you do not want to do that. You are not in danger of spinning the wheels like you would in a stock car. So green flag, starting in map 1, gear 1. Hopefully the AI will be compliant with us today. So maybe if you're in the back, some guys are going to take it very easy, like Peterson here. Thankfully we got healing damage on to prevent this video being ruined by our AI overlords. Gonna go ahead and make a pass, that pass will not work on humans. They will be going too fast. Those AI cars really slowed down. But now we're at the very back of the pack of this giant train of cars, and like I was talking about before, lift early, lift often. Sometimes I even get out the gas fully, slowly get back into it, and prioritize my exit speed. So again, these AI cars, they're being very careful. They're not they're obviously on the lower difficulty setting, and the faster ones up to the front. So we'll try and get to the ones at the front. There's a couple negatives with practicing an AI, in which you saw one of them. The other is the AI are impervious to being aero push. They do not understand what aero push means, so they will just drive flat up behind each other, and they have that advantage. So there's not much you can really learn from that perspective. Now that we're actually at the AI cars that are somewhat fast, this will be a better illustration of what I kind of do in a train of cars. Again, lifting early, lifting often, letting the car settle, getting on the throttle as soon as I feel I know I can make the corner and not track out. You can see here how strong the draft is. Like, I'm trying to pull out and make a pass, but if all the cars are on the high line on the backstretch, oh, they're wrecking in front of me. The draft is so strong that if you pull out a line, oftentimes you're just passed by a train of cars on the high side. And this is particularly prevalent at places like Michigan, Auto Club, but it can happen in Indianapolis as well. One thing to take note of too is watch my fuel number during this stint. And if you want to go back to the beginning of the practice start and see how my fuel number is kind of reacting to how fast I'm going, my throttle position. That last lap I ran a 0.53 average, or 4.75 miles per gallon. I've been in map 1 this whole time, and that saves you a lot of fuel. So that's another reason why it's very important to make sure you're in draft. It is significant amount of fuel saving. I can kind of do the mental math in my head right now of, I just did a 0.57 there, for example, but the previous lap I'd done a 0.53, which I can maybe achieve if I'm back in map 5. If I know my full push number is 0.63 and I'm hitting a tenth lower than that per lap, I know that if I run 6 laps at that pace, I save 1 lap of fuel, which can really add up, and don't mind that mistake. So here we are again, we're going to try and get a clean fuel number here running map 5. We'll probably have to lift a little bit as well, even in the traffic, but I am saving fuel here running behind someone 0.8 of a second back. I could really save a lot more if I'm just tucked up behind somebody, especially lifting more. That's ideally how I'd want to save the most fuel, but right now, running in a line of cars, I am saving fuel. Coming around turn 4 here, a little bit closer, and I can just tuck up right behind AI Lundgaard here, and you will see this will happen very often on the straightaways. Is we'll just decide, well, no one wants to push, we'll just ride in line, we'll be map 5. And the last lap fuel number was 0.52, so that was a tenth less fuel than a full push number. And like I said, run 6 laps at that pace, and you save a lap of fuel. So in terms of general fuel strategy as well, what I will always do is in my little dash here, it lets me set the fuel number, whatever number I want it. I can make it an average of 10 laps if I wanted. I can make it an average of 30 laps if I wanted. But what I do is I find the baseline fuel number, which at Indy is 0.63, and I input that into Z1 dashboard, and I will always know how much fuel I will need to finish the race depending, how long the race is. So right now this is just a timed race. I didn't set it up as laps, but right now it's telling me I would have to add a certain amount of fuel right here. And what I kind of do is, if I can have my total fuel level be higher than my fuel to finish in the midst of like a fuel save run or anything like that, I will know I will be able to make it on fuel the rest of the race. If I'm not, what I can do is, if I look at my add fuel box down below there, I can simply see, well, according to my baseline fuel number, this is how much fuel I would have to add to the stop. And that's just easier for me. I can just look at that number and reference it, and that's how much I would have to add. Another thing I mentioned as well, and this is dependent on the weather, is you need to make sure you're not running your radiator too closed up. A vast majority of the time, 70% on the super speedways and the intermediary tracks and the fast short tracks like Iowa, for example, is completely fine. But for other tracks, sometimes you have to use 54%, so your car doesn't blow up, so your engine doesn't blow up. The temperature at which the oil light warning will come on is 282 degrees Fahrenheit, and I believe for the water temperature, it's something like 265 degrees. I'll double check on that. It's very unlikely that you'll have a motor blow due to engine temperature being too high, but it can happen if the ambient temperature is decently high. So the threshold between choosing whether you want a 54% radiator inlet or a 70% radiator inlet, it's mostly dependent on if it's like 82, 83, 84 degrees ambient temperature. Probably just to be safe, you want to add a 54% radiator to your car. Typically though, you can get away with 70%, and you normally want 70% because, well, a radiator inlet cover is closing out how much air passes through the car, and to really prioritize making sure you don't have too much drag, you want less air going through the car, so 70% is typically what you'll run, and that's also what you'll run on road courses too, that we'll talk about here in a bit. Alright, so we've gone over basically most of what we need to cover here, but we're going to do one more thing, and that's a practice pit stop. So as we do this, we'd obviously call it pitting over chat, pitting. even though it's AI and they wouldn't know what that means. I'm gonna kind of back up my corner a little bit, go to car neutral settings, brake hard, and this car has a lot of stopping power. You can brake really hard on pit entries. You want to still be careful, you might lock up your tires, but that's where you can adjust brake balance or brake bias for your car. You typically set the brake bias to optimum pit in. We don't really brake on too many ovals. Careful not to slide your car into the box, nice and easy. Picker's doing their work, fuel is in. And we go. Getting easy on a pit out here. We've reset our tools. We're back to map 1. We'll see if we have any cars coming onto the track right now. Looks like we got AI New Garden approaching. So it's no different than a highway. Once you get on the backstretch, just double check the relative. Is anyone coming? Nope. So we move high, catch the draft, and get back to racing. So there's one more quick thing I want to talk about, and that's just me going over what are some like basic things I can change with the fixed setup to make it a little bit more competitive in the open series. So I will say though, in recent seasons, the Indy fixed setups have actually been quite decent. They have been improved on the oval side, and there's not too much fundamentally you have to change. But the things you want to double check are, first is, what is the wheelbase? We have always like generally run like across all teams, across the entire community. I've never seen a wheelbase of 121. I've only seen 119. Everyone uses 119 because 119 is faster. That's simply the reason why. In terms of other basic things, you usually want a very stiff front end. So we got 6 ARB on the front here, and we got a steel bar. So steel is stiffer. In the rear, in this case, we have a rear bar. So I was adjusting the rear bar, and I remarked about how you can actually have a setup that does not have a rear bar and still be able to adjust it. So I'm taking out the rear bar. I can still change the blades. It changes the preload, but there's no bar, so it's effectively not doing anything. I was mentioning the radiator settings, and here they are. So you got the full list of settings here. Typically, you want to make sure you're running 70%. 77% is not available in the race, because if you ran that, your engine would explode. 77% is only available in qualifying. In terms of other basic changes to fixed setup and making it more competitive for open, I would strongly recommend reading Brandon Treno's guidebook that is for free. It's a free ebook that he wrote that talks basically about every single part of the car, his setup philosophy, how he makes the car faster, and how he does that. And also these videos that were done by Adam Blocker, who's a member of the community, who basically goes over as well very intricately every detail of the car, basic set of parameters and philosophy. If you really want to know every single little bit of the car, how it reacts, and things like that, I highly recommend watching those videos too. Alright, so we've switched to the road course side now. We're sitting on the track at Road America in the car here. I'm going to show you just some very basic behaviors of this car. Now, it's a formula car. It's high downforce. It's high horsepower. It's going to act like most other cars like that in that category do. But there's some other weird kind of quirks to it that we'll get to as well. So one quirk about Indy cars is that the tires, there are no tire warmers. Now, I don't know if it's exactly modeled in iRacing, but nevertheless, you're still kind of a sitting duck when you come out of the pits on fresh tires in IndyCar. So I'm going to go ahead and show you just how much of a sitting duck you can be. So we're exiting the pits here. We're on the primary tires, so the black sidewall tire. And exiting the pits. Yeah, a little bit loose there. Again, this is not an atypical driving experience if you've driven other high horsepower, high downforce cars before. You can brake very deep in this car, so down to just under 60 miles an hour, and powering up pretty quickly. There's not a lot of wheel spin when you're applying the power in a straight line. It's out of the corners where you get the most, but that's also where you gain the most time, so you want to be really quick out of the throttle here. So by the time you've done like a half a lap of the circuit, your tires are basically up to temperature, but truly fully well and ready after a lap. And that can often be a factor when it comes to pit stops, is if you make an early pit and try for an undercut and someone goes longer, you may lose a little bit of time. but by the time you come out of the pits and you're behind the car that has just exited, you're on the warmer tires, and they're going to be struggling a bit to kind of get back up to speed. So that's often where a lot of passes will happen, is in those sequence of pit stops. So one thing for the IndyCar that's unique on the road side but not the oval side is the fact that there is push to pass. In a race, you have 10 button pushes, and they last for basically as long as you're full throttle, or it goes away after 20 seconds or so. So we're going to use it right here out of the carousel, and we're on the button. So we're shifting past 12K because we now have an extra 300 RPM when we're on the button. So shift past your blue lights. And you can see we're gaining quite a lot of speed here in the Canada corner. Gonna brake very hard for it. And just let the car roll through the corner and back on the gas as soon as we can. The one thing you're gonna notice as well is now the rears are gonna start going away now that we're a couple laps into our fuel run here. So you can drive the car off the rears on the road course side, much more so than the oval side. In fact, basically you can't on the oval side, as I mentioned before. So you can get away with getting the power down and kind of sliding a bit, but you have to make sure you're still taking care of your rear tires. You cannot just slide your rears around and expect to have rear traction by the end of your fuel run. So the tires aren't too worn, we've not done too many laps, but I'm going to be a bit silly and just apply the throttle out of 5 very quickly and see if we can't get this thing to fishtail. So we're here, gassing. You can see it nearly goes around on me there. You can have a much more controlled slide, particularly on the red tires, because those are softer, you can get away with them. Primaries are harder tires, so not so much, but that is to say, if you are sliding, you can easily recover it just by kind of lifting out of the gas and counter steering. So there, just like that. Alright, so that short stint was on the primary compound tire, the black sidewall tires. We're now going to try the alternate tires, or simply denoted by having red sidewalls on the side of the tire. So the main difference between the two is that the primary tire is a harder tire, it is a more durable tire, it should last you longer in a race, and it's going to have less degradation. The alternate tire, on the other hand, is a softer tire, will likely have more rear degradation, and may not last as long. That's to say, there are ways to make the red tire last longer, and there might be some races where the red tire might be like the dominant tire, or the primary tire might be the dominant tire too. One of those two, it just kind of depends on the track temp and lots of other factors too, in terms of like what makes this like an alternate race or what makes it a primary race. So we're gonna go next to the pits now, start our out lap on the primaries, and watch what happens here in our out lap. Whoa. The one way you can avoid that is being a little bit more cautious, of course, but it's a softer tire. It's gonna, meld and be shapeable more in some sense, and that's what can kind of happen if you're not careful. On the opposite side of it, you can also potentially, depending on how your car is set up, you could actually understeer as well, because there's not enough heat in the tires. Right now, as it is, I don't have to go down the front bar, but generally we go down like 1 or 2 in the front bar, make sure the car makes it through the corner, get our tires up to temperature. Right now we're just prioritizing making sure we get through these initial corners, and now on the straightaway, now the tires are starting to heat up. We can go up a click on the front ARB, and it'll be driving normal relatively quickly after that, once you take a couple more corners. So you can see with the alternate tires here, I'm able to brake much deeper into the corner much better, get on the gas much quicker as well. So I can carry a lot more speed than I was before on the primary tire. It goes without saying that when you qualify for a road course race in the IndyCar, you qualify on the alternate tire. Right now, as it is in the official iRacing series, you do not have to start the race on the tire you qualify on. So you want to qualify on the you want to qualify on the alternate tire. So the alternate tire on the car is going to be much more active with regards to throttle inputs. There you can feel the rear sliding around, but completely in control. See if we can induce it here again. So into the corner, early in the gas, well, big slide. Obviously don't want to be doing that, but that just kind of goes to show how much you can drive the car off the rears. If anything like that happens to you in the race, in any race in a road course, just kind of take it easy the next couple of corners, maybe brake a tad bit early, let your rears recover, and then go back to driving as usual. Now for the official IndyCar series on iRacing, whether it's the Open Series or the iRacing Indycar series, the one thing that you have to make sure you do is you take both sets of compounds of tires. Just like real IndyCar, you must use both the primary and the alternate tire for at least one racing lap. So you kind of have to plan your strategy accordingly when you do those races. You must use both compounds, just like the real series. So in terms of like what a typical road setup will look like, I'm just going to use an example from Brandon here, who is posting some form setups for last season. And this is a setup for Montreal. But generally speaking, especially in terms of aero options, most of the aero options are exactly the same. There's always double plane wing flap config. It's always on the highest wing angle, and there's always the 3/8 inch wicker on the rear. On the front aero here, we have a double plane wing flap. Main plane extension is on. There's no wing wicker. You have the option for a 3/8 inch wicker there as well, but it's off on this one. And it gives you a nice front downforce percentage of 42.36%. Now, this is always depending on ride heights and lots of other different things, but if you have this number in the front too high, of course, that will give you a looser car, but will make it much more difficult to control. In terms of our chassis options here, so if you look at the front here, the front ARBs are stiffer than the rear anti-roll bars. The reason is because, as you saw, the car can get quite tail happy under acceleration. So you naturally want a softer rear and a stiffer front to kind of just control the chassis. In terms of things that are specific to the road course car compared to the oval car, the one thing you have the option of using, one of these is the third spring. The third spring, in layman's terms, essentially just controls the pitch of the car, so how it reacts going up and down, particularly under braking, and that's obviously something you want quite stable because, you know, with aerodynamics, if your car is pitching up and down, well, the airflow over it is not even, and it's gonna, firstly, it's gonna reduce your mechanical grip, but if it's not a stable chassis, then it's gonna have other issues too. So you have it in the front, you also have it in the rear, and the other options that you have are in the drivetrain, and that's the differential, so it's road course only as it mentions. If you look at the number of clutch plates here, well, the more clutch plates you have, the more locking force that you have, and you could go all the way up to 12 if you wanted, but typically you want to make sure you're not having the diff too strong because, you know, under braking and, you know, downshifting, that's going to apply a lot of force to the car. So typically, this is like a typical, you know, clutch plate setting that you would want. You also have ramp angles as well, and the setting here is also pretty typical on the road side. Once again, I recommend, in terms of just general setup philosophy, either reading Traino's ebook or looking at Blocker's videos that I was talking about earlier. So now that we've gone over the basic driving characteristics, I want to try and apply what we learned in terms of the fuel maps, tire strategy, and look at it with real race examples. So this one's from the oval side, and we'll also take a look at one on the road course side too. So we're just about to start the race. Remember, first gear always, green flag is out, and we're heading towards turn 1 and 2 right now. So the one thing at intermediary ovals and high-speed ovals like Fontana, Michigan is you're not going to have to lift in turn 1 and 2. You're not going fast enough that there's going to be enough dirty air produced, but you are going to be going fast enough here in turn 3. So I'm already half throttle entering the corner, even though I got a car plenty well ahead. It's not going to aero push me too much, and I've already got some healthy weight jack into the car. I checked my in-car tools before playing. I was plus 10 weight jacker into the corner there because my car was able to do it. It wasn't going to spin around. So I'm entering the corners very smoothly. I'm getting off the throttle, even though I know I can make it, you know, full throttle around the corner. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not hurting the right front. And it's especially important in this race because the track temp, I think it's in here, is 127 degrees at this point. So this is a situation where you can easily burn off your right front, especially in the dirty air. So you can see everyone's taking different lines, and sometimes you can't because there's only so much room in the racetrack. And if there's a car in front of you, you're gonna have to make sure, as I said earlier, lift early, lift often, and you wanna try and find clean air. Here you see, I just so happen there's clean air on the bottom, so I'm gonna take the bottom. You see a lot of other cars looking for the high side, and sometimes if you go on the high side, well, other people are going to look on the high side too, and you might get their dirty air either in the middle of the track or up on the third groove as well. So it's really important to find clean air, especially in situations like this, because clean air over your nose means that you are not going to scrub as much speed, the fronts are not going to skate as much, and therefore it's going to save your right front tire. So my strategy at this point is I'm going to just try and ride where they're not. I'm going to run the normal line, I'm going to lift early. At this point, I'm also in a lower fuel map. I'm actually in fuel map 3 right now, so it's not the full fuel save map, but it's saving me a little bit of fuel, but also decreasing my overall speed and helping me make the corner as well. If I fired into the corner map 1 here, I'm probably fine based on this because that car is well ahead of me and not giving me dirty air. But this is a situation where sometimes you may have to play a long game with a high track temp, keeping your tires cool, not roasting them. And you can see that guy's already starting to push up really bad. So he's in map 1 and he's not lifting enough, and we take advantage of that. As well as the guy in front of me, we go high. And eventually we'll wrap around him. And this is another good example of if you keep your momentum up in the corner, you can pass someone pretty easily on the high side. So right now we're only 8 laps in. You might be thinking, well, aren't we a little bit far away from the leaders there? Well, we're actually within a second and a half, so we're not in danger of losing the drafts. And we're just kind of riding at this point. And in fact, if we check our cockpit, we are actually now in map 5. So now we are in the leanest fuel save map, excluding map 8. And we're just kind of riding and seeing what happens. And you can see with my tools, I'm very aggressive. I'm actually plus 15. I'm also 3 in the rear ARB. With some of these stick setups, you want to really practice and experiment to see, well, what are the settings I can use and what can I get away with in terms of the in-car tools. A lot of times, I don't like to run high weight checker settings like this unless I absolutely know they're going to work. In general, with your setup, if you're finding that you have to run a really high positive weight jacker, the one thing you can do to kind of mitigate that is simply raise the rear of your car. Because remember, the weight jacker just raises and lowers the right rear. You can do that in the setup page and not have to rely upon weight jacker in the race. The weight jacker is more a diagnosing tool. It is not meant to fix your setup. It can, but you'd rather have that set in the garage to begin with. So again, we're still kind of chilling. We're keeping in mind this is a high track temp. This is a long race. This is a 75 lap race, and we're only 12 laps in at this point. You can often catch people in these races if they are pushing too hard. Eventually that's going to come back to you. They're going to lose overall time because once you roast your tires, and especially in traffic when you have really badly worn tires, it's very hard to keep up and very easy to lose ground. So unless there's a situation where clean air is extremely valuable, I typically will kind of just ride in the pack, let the race play out, and then as we get closer to the first stop, that's when I begin to push more, or as we get closer to the finish, same thing there as well. As I said before, this race was in a very hot track temp in the high 120s. If you get a lower track temp of like 110 or below, it does get to the point where you can be a lot more aggressive with your lines. You won't have as much tire wear when the track is cooler. So this is kind of a unique circumstance, but even in those lower track temps, if you're not careful behind other cars, you can still push the car too much and hurt your tires that way too. So we're just riding around still, and yellow flag, caution is out, crash on the track. And at this point, we are within a fuel save window. So we pit this caution, we'll come back out and resume from there. All right, so we're 1 to green here. One thing you should note, despite what this looks like, IndyCar actually has single file starts. If you're the leader, you can start down there if you want to, but you're gonna see from this restart here why you probably wanna hold the wall. All right, pace car is in. And here's why you should hold the wall. Because if you leave space up top and the green flag's out, you are free to pass on the high side. So I would highly recommend guarding the wall, especially if you're a leader, because if you don't get the start right, you're gonna get passed immediately. So I'm able to take advantage of that there, although he does make a comeback around the inside line. And at this point, I am not full push. Here's another example as well. I'm looking for clean air. I know it's not gonna be in the middle, so I look high. Guy in front of me goes high as well. He's searching for clean air too. And I think one thing you need to take care of and note is if someone is going seemingly mirror driving in front of you, well, they could be mirror driving, but most likely they're more worried about finding clean air versus giving you dirty air. That is a strategy in itself. You can kind of feed people dirty air, but generally, most of the time, people are just trying to find clean air for themselves. So again, we're map 5 here, knowing we went green with 55 laps to go. That is within our fuel save window, so we're just riding map 5 and hoping it goes caution-free at this point, because if it does, very good things would likely happen to us, assuming we make the number. Alright, we skipped ahead about 20 laps here. For all 20 of those laps, we've been running the low line, and we've been in map 5. And a lot of these guys have been in map 1 full pushing. And you can see just by, rolling the center of the corner, riding map 5, we're able to, I think, get by this guy. We certainly get ahead of him in turn 1. And we're still lifting, 75%, full throttle very quickly, and sneaking up just in front of him. So switching to another car for a moment, if you're in a situation of all the cars in front of you are running the middle here, for example, so he looks high, now he's gonna look low here as another car kind of drifts up high. You always want to be searching for clean air. And if we take a look at this pass here and see what happens. So he's running all the way up to the wall. Car down low was running the bottom, but he is in dirty air, so he drifts up the track quite a bit. Over underpass here. Clean air for this guy here. He's able to complete the pass successfully. I usually see a lot of situations where oftentimes there's like 3 or 4 cars and they all run the high line. They're all slowing each other down with the exception of the leader, and there'll be a car that just hits the bottom beautifully and will pass like all 4 of them sometimes. This mostly happens later in the run when there's a big tire difference, because again, as the run goes on, as the tires wear, it's much more has much more influence on aero push in those cases. So by this point, we've saved a lot of fuel. We're still running in map 5 at the moment, but I'm looking at my Z1 dashboard at this point. I'm doing the countdown, the backwards math, knowing I'm nearing the amount of fuel where I know I can make it full push. So I believe, right here, map 1. So at this point, it's 27 laps to go at this point, 28 laps to go. And I'm now full push, knowing I'm actually not quite at my number, but I know that I'm in the draft and I'm having to lift quite a bit. I'm going to be naturally saving fuel. So there's always a bit of game of chicken when it comes to fuel saving. Of sometimes drivers might go before they actually know for certain that they're good. In this case, I do this because I'm pretty confident I can go full push, make my way through the field, make up some time that I've lost by fuel saving, and get to the front. And again, while we've taken care of our tires, they're still worn tires, it's still a hot track temp, so I have to be very careful about just barreling into the corner. I'm, modulating the throttle a lot here, still mind the fact that there's a car who's likely on map 1 and pushing just as much as I am. And again, I'm lucky here that the car chooses the middle lane, I choose the bottom lane, and I'm able to get a nice run through the corner. And same again here in turn 3 and 4. At Vegas, turn 3 and 4, there might be a lot of grip up higher, but you have to also take into consideration of cars in front of you and your tire wear. So now we're making up buckets of time at this point. A lot of the cars ahead of us are not good on fuel, and they've been full push, really roasting their tires, and we've just kind of taken our time in the back and starting to make our way through now. Now, we're fortunate here that this race actually does stay green. If it doesn't stay green, well, this strategy of mine doesn't work, because now I've just lost track position for nothing. I'm trying to make a fuel save run and a caution comes out. Well, now I'd have to race my way to the front, not doing fuel save, just full push after the caution ends. And I'd be at a disadvantage being behind all those cars. Here's an example of a very dramatic effect of aero push. So these 2 cars choose to go low. I choose high. So I've got fresh air in my nose, I'm carrying a lot of speed. They might be in a fuel save map still. I'm in map 1, and it's quite easy for me to get around on the high side here, and then I look low here, complete the pass. Again, I'm still very careful. I go full throttle as soon as I know I can make it out of the corner without hitting the wall. And based off us taking care of our tires, we're able to fire down low. These other cars were basically racing very hard for the entirety of the stint. Now they're having trouble just making the entry into turn 1 and 2, and they basically have no other choice but to run it high because it's not going to turn very well. I'm able to run low, and all that time I saved, fuel saving, taking care of my car, it's all coming back to us now. And so here's an example of someone trying to take the bottom with those worn tires. He goes down low, tries to hold it, his car's already sliding up. So we take advantage of that. He's got so much less speed out the corner. We get into his draft, get a bit of his side draft. We don't need his side draft now at this point. We're about to clear him going into the corner. He tries to take it low again. And he's really trying to search for that grip, but he just does not have enough speed to carry out in order to stay behind me. Skipping ahead here with 6 laps to go. We've got quite a substantial gap now between us and P4 behind us, thanks to our tire advantage. And now, this whole time we're praying, well, certainly the guys in first and second, who are always in clean air, probably were not running in a fuel save map. Thankfully, for our race, they do have to pit to take a splash. So here we are, we're taking the white flag. You see fuel remaining 0.43, 0.37 is roughly the normal fuel number, full push at a mile and a half track. And there you can see fuel pressure low, that's okay. We have enough fuel. And we'll make it through turn 3 and 4 here to take the checkered flag. Of course, races won't always go smoothly like this. This is a race that just seemed to have everything right for me happen. There could have been more cautions at the end. It could negate the whole fuel strategy, but thankfully for us, we were able to pull this one off. All right, so the other example race we're gonna look at is a road course race that happened at Okayama. It's a really good example of like kind of tight technical tracks that IndyCar often goes to, where there's middle to high speed corners where you really gotta get out of the throttle to avoid aero push and kind of make sure you're not sliding your front tires here too. So green flag is out. And we gotta make sure we take it easy into turn 1, especially with this car, get the tires up to temp, get them up to pressure. If you don't, if you're driving in too far, you might go off to the gravel trap like so back there. And right now, the first lap is just about keeping the car on the track. It's a great way to also make up spots early if you are able to drive the car really well on the start, cold tires, but you saw the back end almost went around there, so did mine, because we're so fresh into a run. So again, we're doing a nice lift and coast here. Again, still early in the run. No point in pushing quite yet. Especially, at this point, I'm also trying to gauge, like, what are the other guys' like speed? What's their line? Like, where are they braking? I don't want to make like crazy moves unless I absolutely have to. You can, but I tend to drive a little bit more conservatively and try and get my time later on in a stint. So the opening laps are kind of again, like I said, it's your opportunity to kind of take notes about what people are doing, how their car is reacting, and try to gauge, well, where can I best make a pass? There's not a lot of great passing opportunities at Okayama, so a lot of the time it is simply just waiting for the stint to play out as well. If you try and do too much during a stint on a road course like this, that is where you do make mistakes and you will lose a lot of spots. Here's a good example of the mid-speed corner here, so tight, left-hander where I'm out of the throttle even with, a car pretty far up the road, not too close, just because I'm very mindful of keeping my front tires clean and not scrubbing them too much. And again, I do want to make mention of the fact of the weather here is a bit of an outlier. This is a very hot track temp. It's very rare to get track temps like these in official series, but it does really make for fun racing and does really magnify the things I want to talk about in terms of what will happen to your car if you overdrive it, because you can overdrive your car in 1/16 track temp, and you could still have similar problems with tire wear and that sort of thing. But when it's a very hot track temp, that's when it really is important to make sure you're doing the right things. So we're skipping ahead a couple laps here. We're gonna watch this whole lap. So again, nice, easy lift and coast into turn 1. The car in front, the 2 cars in front, I should say, have been really battling this entire time. So they're really wearing off their fronts in the case of the kind of the green car in front of us. And the guy in front certainly probably really heavily relying upon his rears to get out of the corner so he can stay ahead of that car too. As this lap goes on, we kind of slowly start inching closer and closer to the cars in front of us, and we're almost ready to pounce by the end of this lap. So here again, we have a nice lift and coast into the hairpin here, and the car in front doesn't really have that opportunity because they may have to brake pretty early depending on like what the car's gonna do in front, because of course he's really focused on not hitting him too. I'm fortunate that I have that space where I can take my normal lines and know I can make it through the corner. But running this close to the car, again, with that dirty air really plays, really does a number on your tires. So by the end of lap 9 here, we basically have the gap from the car in front of us, and now we're really beginning to start to race them. And again, just kind of note my throttle input here. So we're half throttle, then when we're ready to go, full throttle again. If you're like dancing on the throttle, like, you know, Iron Senna style, where you like really punch the throttle, that's actually really bad on iRacing. It's not something you want to do. Just give nice sustained throttle inputs and full throttle right when you know you're not going to spin those tires. Moving ahead a couple laps, here's the battle in front of us for second and third. And the second place car just gets on the gas a little bit too early, and car goes around. He saves the car. He continues the race, I believe, but that now really puts him back, and he really paid for the hard driving he had to do to stay in front of the other car. So now that puts us really in the catbird seat, where now we only have the one car of aero push that we have to deal with through these corners. So now we can make up a lot of time on this guy that we really couldn't do as much before. Skipping a couple of laps ahead here, and now we really see his tires versus mine. He takes his entry a little bit wide. He's a little bit squirrely under throttle, and now I'm on push to pass at this point, I believe. Yes, I am. So now I'm really trying to make the pass. Can I get there? No. I'm going to show my nose and just say, hey, I'm here. You know, it's an old school road course trick. Most people aren't going to fall for it, but sometimes you can kind of rattle people if you do that. And so now he's really driving for his life at this point. He's really staying into these corners, hoping he can just keep me behind because, yeah, his tires might be really off, but in this track temp, these conditions, it's quite difficult for me to follow still. I still got to really nail my marks in order to get by this guy. So here we are in the attack again, and this is where you do have to be careful. Yes, you're having so much speed from your push to pass that when you take your normal brake mark, you may lock up, and when you lock up your tires, it really overheats them, and that's going to cause issues, you know, basically for the next couple of corners. So I'm taking my time here. I'm not pushing too much because I know I just roasted my tires, and I don't want to spin off the track at the very next corner and lose all the progress I've made. So after my lockup, I don't have another chance to attack this guy for another 3 laps, and we're a bit fortunate here because he's held up by a lap car. His exit speed's not good here. I'm really on the gas. Now I'm pushed to pass, and I'm within really close to his draft range now on the road course. I carry the overspeed with the push to pass. Get a nice braking maneuver in there. He's holding on the outside, but inside of the corner, pressure tires were able to make the pass stick. And now watch how this guy's gonna really struggle. For the first time in quite a while, he's behind Dirty Air. His tires are really worn. And he's doing a really good job keeping it with me through these corners, but once we get to the high-speed exit corners, that's where he's really going to suffer because of the rear tire degradation. So he's going to be able to keep with me here in the corners where it's mechanical grip, but I get a nice launch here. Here's a high-speed right-hander, and he's aero pushing quite a bit there, and I'm beginning now to build a gap. And I really get the power down out of this straightaway, and I'm probably pushed to pass to try and get away. I'm not here. I could be. You can use it when you're ahead of people too. You often use it in response to what the car is doing behind, and it's really important to manage those push to passes because if you really burn through those early, it makes it very hard at the end of the race when you're defending position, where if you were to have like 2 push to passes and the guy behind you's got 5, and as the laps wind down, you know, he can afford to use them, and you can only afford to use it twice. So you really have to pick and choose like where you use them, and you have to drive really hard to avoid kind of being under attack from a push to pass. So I skip ahead another couple of laps, and at this point we have a comfortable lead. Again, he's in striking distance. We're not under pressure, but as long as we take care of our car, even if you were to get closer, it becomes quite difficult to pass the longer you go into your tire stint. So this is a 30-lap race, but we could only go roughly 25 laps in a tank of fuel when we did this at the time. This is in the fixed series, so you are not required to have to use both compounds, but let's say this was an open race. We're going to dive into the pits. We were only on the primary tire, so we're going to go ahead and switch to the alternate tire. Careful on the pit-ins here because they can be quite tricky in old tires, but you can really make up a lot of time in road course racings with really good pit-ins as well as pit-outs and in-laps and out-laps. So especially on your in-lap, if you have push-to-passes to spare, use them because that's an opportunity to gain time. And we still have to be careful. Again, these are fresh tires that we got to get them up to temperature. And also be mindful of these are cars that had just pitted the lap before, so they have fired up reds. They can very easily make our life very difficult here, but we're able to stay ahead of them, which is really, really crucial. So now they've got the dirty air behind us, and we have fresh track in front of us for the most part. And we really, really get a good launch out of there. And it's especially helpful Thankfully for our race, they were fighting behind us and we were able to keep the gap that we had. So now with the red tires, I can brake very deep in the corners, especially because I have low fuel. In fact, I wasn't used to how good the tires were. I turned in so well to the corner, I'm surprised I didn't get a 1X there. However, once again, keep in mind the red tires are the softer tire. They're only meant to be used for so long. And with this track and this track temperature, they didn't last very long for me. So this is really only viable if you can make it the full fuel stint. So at this point in the race, we were able to have a comfortable P2 and just a matter of putting the laps together and bringing the car home, getting by some of the lap traffic, which is inevitable at races like this. People have incidents or have penalties that they have to serve. There'll usually always be some lap traffic, and dealing with that can be, a hassle at times. But again, generally people are quite polite. Most people in IndyCar kind of know each other, and they'll move aside and not provide too much trouble. And once you're in the closing stints of a race, it's simply about tire management with these red tires. And you can literally see rubber being laid down. That's how soft they are in the game, you can literally see the rubber being put down on the track. And at the final corner, we take the checkered flag, finishing P2 in this race. And again, we only had really one notable battle this race, and that's often how road course racing goes. You're often just racing against the clock and racing against the lap times of one singular car, perhaps two of them, and maybe not even seeing them so much on the track. So for road course racing, it's always important just to make sure you're kind of composed. Remember, it's a long race unless you're doing a sprint race, and there's always opportunities for other cars to make mistakes too. And so long as you're keeping the car on the track, you can really capitalize on those. There's one more important resource that I want to talk to you about, and that is the IndyCar Community Discord. The IndyCar Community Discord is a Discord that features roughly over 600 members, including most of the top drivers within the series of most of the major teams, and it's really our sounding board to really kind of collectively organize races, talk about ongoings within iRacing Indycar, as well as organizing and discussing leagues. Some of the channels we have include just general iRacing chat, a channel for the Indy Open series, a channel for the Fix series, the Sprint Fix series, as well as the IndyCar iRacing series. We also have channels devoted to leagues, and there's many IndyCar leagues you can choose from, and you're of course free in that Discord to help promote those leagues as well. There are also channels devoted to setup building and setup resources as well. And of the people that are there, especially those who are engineering minded, if you were to ask them a question about setup stuff, publicly or privately, we're generally a very friendly bunch, and we're more than happy to help you with setup things or just general IndyCar stuff as well. You can also find links to guides that have been made in the past in this Discord as well. So if you have made it to the end of this very long guide, much longer than I honestly thought it would be, but I think it'll be a very good resource at this length. If you've made it to the end of this, I want to thank you for watching, and if there's one more piece of advice I could give, it's simply just logging laps. It's very hard to kind of look at something and make that initial jump into the series, because all this might seem very overwhelming. But if there's one piece of advice I could give, it's simply just jump in the car, learn the car, run laps, and just kind of figure this out by trial and error, because you can watch as many guides as you want, you could read as many ebooks as you want, you could watch as many setup videos as you want, but until you're actually in the car just understanding how it works, then it's really going to be kind of hard to get going in that sense. All the resources I talked about will be linked in the description, including maybe some other things I've forgotten later. And in the comments, I am more than willing to answer any questions you may have about this car, or I can try and direct them to people who do know the answer. So thank you once again for watching, and hopefully we'll see you out on the track.